Okay, happy birthday, Wolf Prix. It is the 13th of December 2021, and today Mr. Wolf Prix is 74 years old. So I will try to make a presentation, another presentation on his works, rather large, because I wanted to show as much as possible about this architect who does mean something for our time. Let's hope. I don't know what's going on here with okay. So his website, first of all, the office, the architecture office that he founded and leads, Kop Himmelblau, and the website also is about this mysterious letter CHB and then L between parentheses. It's a play with words, you know. It's kind of like you know, the blue sky cooperative, but there is a metaphor here present, and it's essentially, I would say, connected with the quotation from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry that is printed on the cover of the book, the thick book with Studio Prix, with his activity and the students that they were in his studio between 1990 and 2011, when he was leading the Institute of Architecture in Vienna. And I will read you this short quotation from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry because it's very relevant. If you want to build a ship, don't drum don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Beautiful. So make them long for the endless immensity of the sea. So again, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't teach them, don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. And I was discussing about this just before I started the presentation. Why are our students tired? Well, that's exactly why, because they are not given, they are not made to long for the immensity of the sea, but instead they are taught all kinds of technicalities which tire them off, and they don't have any longer that desire for the immensity of the sea, the endless immensity of the sea that Antoine de Saint-Exupéry talked about. And I think this is very, very important. If the architect and the student don't have any longer that desire for exploration, for being a pioneer, for discovering new things, of course, inevitably, you know, being tired is there. You know, I mean, you have to discover new things. And I'm very glad that this architect, Wolf Prix, understood this. And he's practicing it through his own office, and he's practicing through his own example, and he's practicing also when he was teaching, he was practicing it the same belief in the endless immensity of the sea in his atelier. So let's look at more things about him. Here he is interviewed. I think he has a nostalgia for 1968 or so, for a certain engagement of the avant-garde with society, a belief in change, a belief that we can change the world, we can change society, we can change many things. And you know, some cynics would say that such a belief is you know, incongruent with our times, but I think we need it badly more than ever. Here he is with his initial partner, the partner on the right, on the left, and Wolf Prix on the right. At that time, I don't even know if they imagined the success that Kop Himmelblau was to have. Here he is again, and again, always very elegant and dressed very, very well, and with a whimsical smile. I like his sense of humor, actually. Like, for example, when he said, "I can take a lot of praise," you know, it shows humor. Wolf Prix and Helmut Schwizinski, I'm not sure I pronounce well his family name. They were the two partners that started Kop Himmelblau. Wolf Prix and Helmut Schwizinski. Here they are at the time when, again, you know, the prospect of great success was rather distant. They were younger. They split at one moment, and you know, now Wolf Prix has another partner. But the office continues. Kop Himmelblau. Here he is with Lebia Suits. Lebia Suits with an incredible vitality in his laughter. Unfortunately, he died in 2012. And on the right, of course, Wolf Prix. Zaha Hadid, Pedagogy as Practice. This was written by Wolf Prix. They were friends. He invited her to Vienna. I understood that she didn't know much. She didn't know German, and I guess there is such a requirement in Austria to know German in order to teach. Well, Wolf Prix, her friend, guaranteed that she would learn German. I don't think she did, but anyway, she ran a studio at IOA, at the Institute of Architecture, for a long time herself. So there. And here he is again as a younger, you know, man, maybe with a touch of sadness and melancholia, maybe, but still you can tell that he was and is and will be a man of action. In more recent years in his office, and with a different expression from the one where I said that he seemed to be a little sad again. And again with a sculpture that he made or was made in his office by his office. He does have a funny, well, sense of humor. It's supposed to be funny, but he does. And I could quote a few times to exemplify it. Now some drawings. I attended a conference in New York where he said, this was many years ago, in 1992 or so almost 30 years ago, where he said, "Me and my partner, we begin a project. We don't read the program. We don't read it. We ignore the budget, the program, the functions. We ignore everything. We close our eyes and we explode with lines on a paper. And then after a while, we open our eyes and then we try to make sense of the lines we drew without looking at the paper." And that's how, you know, that's how the penthouse project, the first that they built, came into being, and we are going to see it. Now he does this sort of sketches, or this sort of sketch. This was from that time when the penthouse project was born. Anyway, sketches. Again, a sketch for that penthouse project, which we are going to see. A rather elaborate drawing. I think this drawing, if I'm not mistaken, or something similar from that time I saw at Archilab events in Orleans near Paris. So, you know, we shouldn't be fooled by, you know, sketches which are very impressionistic, so to speak, because there is also rigor behind, and they were able to generate drawings very technical, actually, and very, you know, very accurate. Anyway, but he has, I mean, you know, these sketches, just like in the case of Frank Gehry, are sustained by a large office with very competent workers. And, you know, There is at least one Romanian there. I know of him, Daniel Bojenaru, who helped him in several projects. One in particular with a complicated or complex roof for the church he built in his hometown, and will arrive at that project. But there were other people, including a doctoral student in Bucharest who worked as an intern there, Sorina Dumitru, who actually she's posting the recordings of these Zoom presentations on YouTube. Okay, so let's start with this project, the rooftop remodeling on Falkenstrasse in Vienna. Across the street, a little bit diagonally from a famous work by Otto Wagner, the postal office. The sketch we already saw, a plan which would alarm the functionalists. But at that time, I remember from the conference that I attended at Columbia University, Wolf Prix used to say, let it bleed, let it leak. He was asking almost, but probably for different reasons, I don't know, in almost similar terms to Mircea Eliade, who said, briser le toit de ta maison, break the roof of your house. Well, as I said, Wolf Prix was saying, let it bleed, let it leak. It was a quest for, of course, it was a gesture of épater la bourgeoisie, but and a reaction to conventionalism, conformism, and so on. But it was also a call for, for breaking up the box, for the, even the inconvenient truth of not just the building, but life itself. Here is a section through that rooftop addition. It's a little bit difficult to read, to see it from the street because it's on top of a tall building. It's possible to see maybe just a little bit of the edge of this unusual element that is present here in the drawing, but otherwise, it's better to watch it as we do now on the web. Why would an architect do something like this? Because that architect, this architect, was uncomfortable with, I am talking symbolically, with the Palladio. He even wrote "Roll over Palladio," paraphrasing Chuck Berry, who said "Roll over Beethoven." I think, I don't know, but I assume that just as Chuck Berry admired Beethoven, it's very possible, but again, I have no proof, but it's very possible that also Wolf Prix admires Palladio. But this rollover Palladio, what could that mean? Well, what it means is that the son always wants to move forward, no, with his own life. He's not going to repeat the life of the father. He wants to assert his own life, his own right to live in his own terms. So then, of course, we are not going to be like Palladio. We could love Palladio, but actually, I would say exactly because we love Palladio, we are supposed to move forward in our own terms. And to move forward in our own terms could even mean, at least metaphorically, to roll over Palladio. I know he's an adversary of columns. He hates columns. He also hates gravity. He wants to fly. He wants to be free. He wants to be, with his wings wide open. Now, of course, architecture has difficulties to fly like this, but if we follow the example of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, I think longing for the immensity of the sea is a noble task. Actually, I would call it a task. How else are you supposed to move forward if you don't advance in the field you chose to act? We need creativity. We cannot remain stuck on the same old road. No. Of course, in the process, it's possible to so-called make mistakes. It's okay. Any lived life cannot, remove itself from what we call mistakes. Even Einstein said that, if one didn't make any mistake at all, it means, he or she never tries something new. When you try something new, it's very possible to, risk making some mistakes. It's okay. The mistakes are part of creativity. The mistakes are part of life. Nietzsche himself said, live dangerously. But when you live dangerously, of course, anything could happen, even bad things, as we call them. Anyway, this is the penthouse they built on the rooftop of a building. I don't know how many floors, 8 floors or something like this, has that building. Some views from the interior. Of course, you could ask, why did they complicate themselves? Why didn't just they make a flat roof and, common rooms and so on? But to ask this kind of question is, is like asking life itself. Why did you move forward? Why didn't you remain stuck in your inertia? Well, if we thought in this way, we would not have art, we would not have inventions, we would not have creativity. I think human beings love novelties. They like the new. They like to be challenged. It's in the human nature, as Louis Kahn said. Louis Kahn said, human beings love beginnings. And, creativity is in charge exactly with that, to create new beginnings. A very nice, I would say, sketch, which probably would attract a very bad grade in most architecture schools. Anyway, an office building in Schlachthausgasse in Vienna. I have seen this building a few times, and it's not just this building. It's there are 3 buildings done by Kop Himmelblau, one near the other, and we'll see. This was done by Kop Himmelblau. This was also done by Kop Himmelblau, and also this. There are 3 different aesthetics in a way, 3 different kinds of doing architecture, all different between each other, and also very different from the buildings across the street and so on. Now, the students I saw the building with, they were not so, seduced by this building. But in my opinion, if you remove this mask, because it is in a way a mask, it's not really structural, it's a mask. But I think we need this kind of masks. We need something to enliven our buildings. This building is stirring up our curiosity. I know it did in my case, and so did the other buildings. And we are going to see behind on the other street also a very different look, if you want, of this building, or this one actually. You'll understand what I'm talking about. Now, of course, the most architects would prefer to continue to be like this. But I'm sorry, I am tired to see the same building all over and over again. I am tired, I want something new, even if you might say, what is this new bringing in? Well, it's bringing a new beginning, as I said. And on the back, when I first saw this, I was on the bicycle in Vienna, and I didn't know it was done by Kop Himmelblau. But when I saw it, I had to stop. I said to myself, this is interesting. I didn't know who the architect was, so I came close. This is quite an astonishing cantilever. It's you can house here in this large space many people, and you can see it's almost floating. And it's also the color red, which makes it dialectically engaging to the green trees, not too far away. Anyway, so this is on the other side of the building, of one of the 3 buildings, the one in the middle, actually. Look at this. Now, yes, you would say this is not sustainable. Well, at that time, there wasn't so much concern for sustainability. And yes, it was an effort. But, yes, it is an effort, financial, structural, from all kinds of points of view, it is an effort. But we need, I mean, any life needs holidays, now needs celebrations, needs changes, needs joy. It's really about joy. Now you would say, sorry, I don't have any joy looking at this. I do. I know. I was on the bike on that street there. And when I glanced at this, I turned immediately with the bike here and I stopped because it attracted my curiosity. I wanted to see it closer. It stirred up my curiosity. This is not enough. I think it is. Look here, the section through the building. And you realize it's an audacious cantilever now, not so audacious like the one built by Calatrava in Rio de Janeiro, but I think this one is also a used space and usable space, as opposed to that 70 something meters long cantilever that Calatrava built in Rio de Janeiro. Wolf Prix and his partner, they were part of the 7, actually there were 8 deconstructivists that had the exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York about 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, curated by Mark Wigley. And today his work maybe is not totally, maybe even at that time, I don't know. I mean, that word was a little bit problematic, or maybe not. Maybe at that time the work, accepted the label deconstruction. But they were there, part of that group. The others were Bernard Tschumi, Peter Eisenman, Frank Gehry, Daniel Lifskin, Zaha Hadid, and Rem Koolhaas. And those who thought at that time that it was just a fashion, well, it was proof that they were wrong, because actually 30 years later, people still talk and look and learn and comment and sometimes criticize the works of the same architects. I mean, here they are. Rem Koolhaas, who would contest that he's still relevant to our time. Zaha Hadid, she died, but she didn't die. Her office continues. They win competitions and they build. Peter Eisenman is 89 years old this year, and he's studying Alberti. I don't know if his office is still open, but he's still kicking, so to speak. Bernard Tschumi, still active. He will be next year 78 years old. Daniel Lifskin, he continues to build. And Kopp Himmelblau, here they are. They continue to build. So, what appeared, I mean, whatever Patrick Schumacher might have said, that there were transitional so-called styles, postmodernism and deconstructivism, I think the so-called deconstructivists proved to have a significantly longer longevity than postmodernism. Postmodernism died at the end of the 20th century, in fact, at the end of the 80s. Maybe around that, at the end of the 80s, while the deconstructivist architects continue to this day, and I would say significantly. Now, another apartment block in Vienna, SAG, you see, it's an architecture that has surprising elements, and these surprising elements create life, create curiosity, create vitality, and I think we need them. Why should apartment buildings look boring? I don't think these apartment buildings are for very rich people. No, it's very possible they are, almost, I could be wrong, I don't know, but almost social housing, perhaps. We need variety. We cannot have just uniformity. There are gestures towards variety, and this variety is asserting life, yes to life. Wolf Prix asked himself, what is architecture? And he himself answered, yes. he didn't say architecture is yes. You know, he didn't give a more elaborate answer. He just said yes. He himself asked, what is architecture? And he said yes, with his humor, which is appreciable. Anyway, moving forward. Apartment building in Vienna. Now another apartment building in Liesen, brewery. Here it is. Okay, we don't employ any longer sculptural works in our buildings, but we could make sculptural buildings. And this is what we look at here. It's a sculptural building. It has sculptural qualities. And at least seen from certain points of view. Look at these columns here as an X. Well, maybe this here could be a chapel for Saint Andrew, who was crucified on an X kind of X looking, an X being cross. That is because he didn't want to, or I don't know, the representations of Saint Andrew didn't want to repeat the crucifixion of Christ. So that's why he's depicted on an X-like cross. I don't know if that was the historical truth, but anyway, this aside, we move forward with Wolf Prix and Kop Himmelblau. The cooperative Blue Sky say yes to Kop Himmelblau, and we are saying yes to Kop Himmelblau together with our happy birthday, Mr. Prix. Here it is. He was very kind. I invited him to be part of the jury for a house for Dante Alighieri, and he accepted. And I'm very grateful. Let's hope we'll receive enough works and good works to bother him with the evaluation process. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare. Apartment towers in Wienerberg city. Here again, we see these diagonals, which you know, not only they connect some buildings, but they also create this disjunction. Bernard Tschumi, the other deconstructivist in 1992 or so, wrote a book about architecture and disjunctions. We need disjunctions. We don't need just placid so-called harmony, because in the dynamics of disjunctions, in the conflict even of disjunctions, the disjunctions generate lies life, palpitating. And I think we need a palpitating life. These are otherwise, you know, almost typical, so to speak, blocks of flats. But because of these diagonals, something eventful happens. And this disjuncture is important, I think. Now, students' dormitory, the gasometer in Vienna, he built, of course, the building on the right, not the building on the left. There were other architects here invited. There are 4 gasometers. One was you know, taken care of, so to speak, by Jean Nouvel, one by Kop Himmelblau, and I don't know the other 2. Anyway, even here we see the rebelliousness of Wolf Prix. It's a dorm for students. And you know, it's the traditionalists would protest, would say why. But I have to tell you, I visited it a few times with the students, and we all admired, you know, the engaging, the dynamic qualities of the building. There is a lot of metal, yes, it's a metallic building. There is zinc, there is, but there is design here. There is, you can tell, you know, there is a rhythmicity here. This was designed is in a certain way, and it works. This is the existing gasometer, and the new intervention added something to the 4 massive old structures. especially when you walk around here, it's very pleasant because you again and again, we need the new. The new is animating us. I have been here with many students and they all said the same thing. They felt more alive. They felt inspired. They felt provoked. They were not bored any longer, and that's a good thing. So in plan, this is the building built by Kop Himmelblau and Wolf Prix. And I think this was the inside by Jean Nouvel, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, here are the four old massive buildings that compose this ensemble called the gasometer. Again and again, I think Kop Himmelblau and Wolf Prix teach us that architecture is an adventure. And it should be an adventure, and it should be a process of discovery, a pioneering work. Unless you discover some new things, unless you do some so-called unusual things, how are we supposed to, escape boredom or repetition? There is conflict, yes, but conflict is part of life, and it should be acknowledged as such and expressed. Otherwise, the plan is rather, clearly functional, with a corridor and, you see the students' rooms and so on. It works. It's not crazy actually, but there are, aspects to it which make it engaging and look rather new. So this is the building here. But they also designed and changed things inside the gasometer. There are other interesting things here built by other architects, like these the small blocks of flats, also interesting and a little bit not quite perpendicular on the earth, which adds to the intrigue, to the drama. And we need drama, I think. We need it. Otherwise, we die of boredom. Central Los Angeles area, high school number 9 for the visual and performing arts, Los Angeles. Now, try to imagine high school students studying in this building. Inevitably, I think they, even without words, they are, told in a way by the building to be similar to it, to be unconventional, to assume risks, and to live towards freedom, to a certain degree of freedom. Maybe total freedom is not possible for human beings, but we have to aspire towards it. Try to imagine a student being taught studying in this school and a student being taught in a school that has identical rooms with lined desks and so on, which only cultivates repetition. And I am absolutely sure that a student who is formed in two different architectural contexts, students who are taught in different buildings could very well become different citizens, so to speak, different adults. Exactly because of, we'll arrive at this, is the bread house. Sorry, this I have to make actually another presentation because this one has some weak points. This is, but we will come back to this. Is Le Musée des Confluences in Lyon, in France, tower which was not built. Here he is, with people around him. Again, we saw this is a building in China. We'll arrive at this. These pictures are a little bit misplaced, I think. But sometimes I guess we have to welcome even less, congruent images in a chronological way or ordered way. It's okay. So this is China. What will arrive at the building will talk about it. Now the energy roof in Perugia, which I like very much, is a work built by Koch Himmelblau with students, by Wolf Prix, with students from Perugia in Italy. I really like this work. You know, look what they built between these two buildings. Now, I don't know about, you know, the explanations that it is an energy roof. Maybe it is, maybe it is not, but I find it very spectacular. You know, the way it is, the way it looks. It's done in an ingenious way, and you'll see it's done from fragments, each fragment differently. Look at them. All these parts work together in order to create this roofing. And I truly like this work. And it was built with the students. Bravo to them. It looks alien now, whatever the word means. But I think most good art at first looks alien. And so is the new architecture. It looks alien at first. But I think we need to welcome the alienness, the strangeness of creativity. I think we do. The European Central Bank in Frankfurt am Main in Germany. Here you see himself actually, you know, demonstrating how he arrived at the building. There is twisting of two prisms. I understood there is a you know, significant complexity in resolving the structure of what we look at. And this is the building. From the outside, perhaps it doesn't look so complicated and complex, but it is. And particularly the inner space here is very Piranesian. By the way, he loves Piranesi. And he's not the only one. Rem Koolhaas loves Piranesi as well. And look what's going on inside. I mean, there are all kinds of complexities within this so-called Cathedral of Money. So this is the European Central Bank in Frankfurt am Main in Germany. They didn't design these buildings. This existed there. They just added this and the tower. I didn't see the building there in Germany. I only saw it in pictures and so on. But I imagine being there, if you study it, you contemplate it, you might discover complexities that at the first sight, you might not be able to see them or perceive them. You know, because from afar, this seems like almost, you know, an already seen kind of glass tower. But there are complexities there because of the twisting and the mirrored images and so on. I think it's much more complex than these towers here in the same city. Now, this was the poster for a presentation he made at Taliesin. This was the Frank Lloyd Wright School, is the Frank Lloyd Wright School, but I think they moved from Taliesin West. I have to tell you that I had a dialogue with the director of the school from Sala Frescelor in Bucharest. He was there at in Taliesin West. I'm talking about Aaron Betsky. I don't know if he's still the leader of the school, but he was at that time. Anyway, the Cultural Center Zarautz in Zarautz, Spain, 2007. This was not built. I think it's just a project. I do know that Wolf Prix wants very much his buildings to fly. I've heard him saying that, you know, they got rid of the fourth leg and they wanted to get rid of the third leg, meaning, you know, the so-called, you know, legs of a building, which normally has four, at least four, you know, at the corners. But they got rid of one leg. They managed to get rid or try to get rid of the third in an attempt, and we are going to see some works in this sense, to make the building as free as possible from gravity. But as we know, gravity is not really so willing to give up on its supremacy and its powers. And you'll understand what I'm referring to when we arrive at that work that shows the tensions between the architect who wants to fly and the building which and gravity, which doesn't allow him to fly. His signature Prix, Villa Soravia in Austria. It's one of the few, in fact, I didn't see another private house that he built. I don't know. I mean, it's a building that is similar to his, you know, large architecture. Here it is a picture of the deconstructivists at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, I think 1992. Do you know who this kid is? Daniel Lipskin. So Bernard Tschumi, the partner Helmut of Wolf Prix. Here is Wolf Prix, Rem Koolhaas, Zaha Hadid, and the curator Mark Wigley. Peter Eisenman and Frank Gehry are missing from this picture. This was you know, almost 30 years ago. The works by Malevich here, who was very inspirational for the deconstructivists, and in particular for Zaha Hadid, Kazimir Malevich and his suprematism. Now we arrive at this church built some years ago, and I understood the Romanian Daniel Bojenaru helped with the modeling, rigorous modeling through, I don't know, scripting and programming of the roof, of part of the most spectacular part of the roof. Is this one that we look at, which is very, you know, it's turbulent, you know, and you know, you know, you can look at the image and say, yeah, but to make it rigorously, dimensionally, to design it and produce it, it was fabricated in a you know, outside of the building site, in a I don't know, shop or something. Here we see the old church, and this is the new church. And I've heard Wolf Prix commenting on the 3 holes unintentionally arrived at, and it made me smile, this unintentionally, because, you know, the Trinity in religion. So this is you can see in a way the you know, the reference, or at least some influence coming from Brâncuș, perhaps, on him. So this church by Wolf Prix could take one by surprise. It took me by surprise too. At first you would say this is not a church, but you know, why should a church be morose or you know, sad, or you know, inhibiting? This is the roof that I mentioned, and I don't know, I read or somebody told me, or I've heard Wolf Prix saying that he's happy, or he's honored to work with Daniel Bojenaru. I don't know. I hope I'm correct in what I'm quoting, but I think he worked on this roof, on this modeling, and you see the modeling is very complex and difficult. You know, it's, how do you do this if you don't know very, very well digital technologies, digital techniques? You know, yes, you can sketch something like this, you know, freehand, but to make it rigorously and to build it, that's another story. And it was done. And I hope I have here a picture with it during the process of being manufactured. In a way, perhaps this is about plus there is a tradition of Baroque architecture in Austria. And this is Baroque modernism, if I can call it so. It's a metaphor in a way about the otherness of God. No? Do we know what God is? No, we don't. But this is, you know, in its silent way, telling, look, this is the house of otherness, is the house of God, and the roof is supposed to be other, so-called other. Otherwise, there are, you know, parts of the building which are not, you know, so-called spectacular. It's here, and here the vertical dimension is manifesting itself. The dialogue with the above, with the sky. Yes, a church by Koch Himmelblau, and a view from the inside. You would say it's too luminous and too joyous in a way, you know, to be a church. But again, why shouldn't a church be joyous? You know, I think it should, and it could. Now, of course, what to look at would make the certain parts of the institutionalized religion tremble. But I think they should know better. You see, the roof is pierced by light. Let it bleed, let it leak. Here the leaking is with not with water, but with light, and in three parts. So a reference to the Trinity. And here is the building in the urban fabric of the town, and the old church and the new church. This one is more modest in dimensions, but in terms of creativity, it's not less. I think it's a good work. And he himself knows it because he was asked, you know, which are the 5 buildings one must see if one is an architect or a student of architecture. And he named them like this. He said the pyramids, the Hera's temple in Paestum, Frank Gehry's building in Bilbao, a plane, Boeing, I don't know, 747. I am not good with planes, but I think anyway, a plane, Boeing, I guess 747. And the 5th one, he mentioned his own church, this church that you just looked at. Now, when he visited Bucharest, I confronted him about this. I mean, I went to him and I asked him, what about Paestum? Hera's Paestum, which is the heaviest building I have ever seen. I never saw the pyramids in Egypt, but I saw the Hera's temple in Paestum. And he denied. He said, no, I am not Paestum, because I know he doesn't like, you know, heaviness and gravity and so on. But that's what I read. It was an interview with him in South Korea, I think. Anyway, beyond Paestum, he included his own church on the list of 5 buildings to be seen. I think it was just built, and of course he had the exuberance and the pride of its author. Okay, moving forward. Again, the most spectacular thing and the most difficult to actually design is this, the roof. Because here is the transition, the frontier between man and God. You know, I mean, it's a place of mystery and a place of uneasiness and a place of otherness, if I am to express myself in this way, and also a place of turmoil. yes, of turbulence. In a way, this maybe expresses his own relationship with what we call religion. It's a questioning, it's a turmoil, it's an anxiety even. If we are to be honest, and we don't accept so-called faith dogmatically. Now, the House of Music in Aalborg, it's in the Netherlands. I hesitated because for a moment I thought it was in Denmark, which has Orhus, but this is in Aalborg. I hope I'm not mistaken. I think it's in the Netherlands, but it could also be in Denmark. I think it's in the Netherlands, but it could be, again, I keep oscillating. I don't know, either the Netherlands or Denmark. It's a good building, I would say. This one again. And you know, look at this elevation. Look at these windows. Now, could you say that ornament is not present any longer in architecture? Well, what are these? These are not ornamental. I think they are. And I'm glad they are. After all, this building is about music. Music is an art. Art cannot distance itself from what we call ornament. Lots of people, but we are going to see also, I hope I have in this presentation the small opera pavilion that he built in München, with also lots of people when the concert was to take place or took place there. Anyway. I like these windows very much. And then you see other kinds of ornamentation, unexpected or expected, I don't know. The water, the reflection of the water, that's what we saw here, I guess. Now, there is an aspect in his work that I think should be mentioned. He said once, if we only think of architecture, we only get architecture. Now, why would an architect want something more than architecture? In fact, when I sent a message to his assistant today, I call this presentation Architecture Beyond Architecture. And in a way, I think it expresses the truth of his work. An architecture which is situating itself, beyond architecture. But what could that be, that beyond architecture? It's a question I ask. And why wouldn't be happy to just build architecture? Why would he want something more than architecture, through architecture? Why? Well, I think it has to do with that immensity, endless immensity. Now, I don't know about the translation. In a way, it is redundant to say the immense, the endless immensity. Immensity, well, maybe not. The endless immensity of the sea that Antoine de Saint-Exupéry talked about. Maybe. So this is the House of Music built by Kop Himmelblau in Aalborg during the construction. During the concert, well, after or before, I guess after, I see people descending the stair. Now, the Akron Art Museum, this was an earlier work built in Ohio, of all places. I read somewhere that, you know, the East Coast had avant-garde architects, the West Coast had avant-garde architects, but many times the Midwest built the works of the avant-garde on the East Coast, you know, and this is an example. Akron is a small town in Ohio. You know, it's not a state, you know, immensely famous for its culture and so on, although it has some interesting things going on there. But they do build, it's true. Cincinnati built an art museum by Zaha Hadid. Akron built an art museum by Kop Himmelblau, and you are going to see also Peter Eisenman built there. They also have the Ohio State University, which is a good university with a good architecture department. Jeffrey Kibnis is the, you know, a significant critical voice in the discourse about architecture today. He's teaching there and so on. Look at this building. You know, it's again the longing for taking off, for flying. The lover of Boeing, I don't know what number, conceived of this thing. Which in a way, what is it? Well, you know, some people would say this is, you know, useless. It has no meaning. It has no function. Well, in immediacy, it doesn't. But if you think again of the endless immensity of the sea and the longing for the endless immensity of the sea, in a way, this roofing is expressing exactly this. You know, a longing for the blue sky, a longing for the unknown, a longing for the endless immensity of the world, which is not acknowledged or recognized by the roofing of this more conventional building. So this was built in Ohio, in Akron, Ohio. It's a small town in Ohio, but they have a, you know, an art museum built by, but they had an art museum here. I imagine this is also an art museum, it's part of the same, but a new addition by Kop Himmelblau to stir up things, to make people, you know, question and wonder and so on. Good, we need that. Kop Himmelblau in Ohio. Now the House of Bread, which is a more recent work built in Austria, the initial sketch. Now you might not see a lot of resemblance with a built work. This is the rendering, but it was built like this, exactly like this. I am not even sure, is it a rendering or a picture, because the renderings today are so accurate that it's easy to say it's the built work. Anyway, it was built exactly like this. And here you see the section through the building. It's the collection of artifacts having to do with bread. Someone collected a lot of things having to do with bread, and they are displayed within this museum here. From what I read, the word museum is not the most appropriate. There is I forgot exactly the description, but it is a building which houses all kinds of a collection of things having to do with bread, artistic works. It's an interesting idea, and I think the building from the outside, but also inside, somehow evokes something about the process of becoming, if I am to express myself in this way, of bread. Here is during the construction, but the building was finalized. I don't know if I have here pictures with it finalized. The House of Bread. The significance of bread in life cannot be overstated. And but I see also something, you know, bit burlesque and humorous, you know. And I do see his statement that architecture, if you only think of architecture, you only get architecture. And I think here he thought of something that made his architecture be more than just architecture. I don't know if I expressed well. Here it is a picture of him. Everything is exquisite, you know, the fabric of his suit, the eyeglasses, everything. But he can be a very serious man, as you can see, and I wouldn't like to have him disconsider the one he talks to. Anyway, the BMW Welt. Unfortunately, these two pictures, no, I apologize already because this presentation is not as good as I wish it was. But we'll continue. BMW Welt, a very important work and an early work. I understood that the owner of, the CEO of BMW, they saw the penthouse they built, him and Helmut, they built on top of that rooftop, and he liked it very much, and they offered them, he offered them the chance to build this large building for BMW, and here it is. Look at this, it's huge. It's huge, and it's it's dramatic. It's attracting attention. Of course, it is a building which tells you, look at me, just as the car itself. BMW is telling you, look at me. Now, if you don't like cars, maybe you are not very impressed, but if you like cars, you are impressed both by BMW and by the building. When he visited the last time that I saw him in Bucharest, he had a cane. He was working with some difficulties, and he explained to us what happened. He said, I always loved speed cars, so I had my Porsche. But a friend of mine told me, Wolf, you are a man of vision, a man of progress. How come you are still using a car? Use the bicycle. So he said, I sold my Porsche and I began to ride a bike. And I fell and I broke my knee. And then I had to spend the money I got for my sold Porsche for the surgeons to repair my knee. The same, the humorous Wolf Prix. So today he's 74 years old. This story I told you about was, I don't know, for 4 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe. So he was almost 70 at that time, trying new things, trying the bicycle. Very good. I think we should all have that spirit, never to become older, never to become stiff, to try continuously new things without fear, if possible. And ideally not to fall, because it can be dangerous indeed. Helmut Jahn, the well-known North American architect, German, born in Germany, died when he rode his bike at 80 or so. Last year, I think he died, trying to bike at 80. And, things happen. Hello, Mr. Prix, happy birthday to you. I used to know who built a well-known architect built this building, but also for BMW, but I forgot his name. Unfortunately, there are many architects, I should know their names, but sometimes I forget. Anyway, this is the building by Koch Himmelblau and Wolf Prix. Now the Busan Cinema Center in South Korea. And here I will tell you a short story, which I think is significant, symbolically significant. This is indeed a building where his attempt to use the highest technology, to almost force technology to have the building fly, is the effort, the largest effort in a way, and we'll understand why. look at the sections of the building. Literally, this thing is almost flying. You know, I mean, it's you wonder where is it supported. And but there is a but here in the story, and you'll soon find out. It's spectacular, yes. It is dramatic. Look at this. You know, it's truly attempting to defy gravity. But I learned in a conference he gave that while they were building this building, the codes, the building codes of South Korea changed, or in this particular place in Busan. So they became more stringent. So when they started the project, they didn't need so much you know, security in this field in the case of you know, need, but the project was already active. They were building the building. They couldn't modify it. So they thought of something, and I'll show you what it is. I hope I have here the section to become explicit about what I'm trying to say. It's a huge thing. I mean, look at this. And indeed, it seems to fly. It's and I mean, look at this. You know, the space is amazing in terms of dimensions. And at night is very spectacular because of the various you know, projections and so on that they. It's also, you see, it's dynamic also because of its positioning within the you know, the building. This part of the building is flying but also falling somehow at the same time. Is complex. But look here, they thought, and it's an interesting thing, you see here the arrows. Well, they try to solve the conflict with the new code, building code, in this way. They invented and they built actually a telescopic structure, which in the case of seismic activity beyond a certain gravity, beyond a certain number, this thing would spring from the earth and support the corner of this audacious structure. So, you know, this is like a cane. You know, in a way, I relate this to him falling with a bike. You know, we want to fly, we want to bike, regardless of our age, but gravity does exist. We do fall. Young and not so young, we do fall. Seismic activity does exist, and you know, if the seism is very serious, then we have to take care of our you know, longing for flying. And this is what in this case Kop Himmelblau thought of doing. The building appears like at the top without any support, but the support is hidden, you know, underneath, and in case of need would spring and help the building endure. Let's hope, you know, there will be no seismic activity. You see better here, this telescopic thing which automatically would spring upwards to support the most vulnerable corner of this huge structure, which otherwise is almost supported in no place. Yes, it is an extravagant architecture. It is an architecture that refuses to conform, but I think we need yes, the cost is significant. This building, when it was built, was not you know, in our time. I don't know if today we would continue to build in this way, but if a new optimism will come to the horizon, maybe we should challenge technology at least sometimes to try its best. Maybe. Although I think now we live at a time which is forcing us to be more modest. But I don't know, maybe what I said now, I should not have said. Because art is really about courage, it's about inventiveness, it's about continuously, you say it's restlessness, and in a way it is some restlessness too. But what would we do if we didn't have the restlessness of art? Look at this, this thing is flying. Imagine these people passing by and looking at this thing, look at this. In essence, is really about longing for not the endless immensity of the sea, but the endless immensity of the sky, and implicitly the endless immensity of what freedom might mean. Yeah, so this is in South Korea. Look what's going on here, and it reminds me a little bit of what I saw on top of Fondation Louis Vuitton of Frank Gehry. These people work with, high caliber, on one hand, employees who know a lot about, employing the most sophisticated technology, but they also know a lot about, the latest achievements of technology itself. So, they simply couldn't work with a T-square and a rectangle. No, that would not be possible. Now, the Cinema Center in Dresden is a very early work by them, and this one I visited, and I like it. In retrospect, look at this building. It appears to be falling, but the falling is actually the need for otherness that art is serving. It's that dislocation, that imbalancing act that art brings into existence. It's a cinema in Dresden, in Germany. The graffitis have the same function in their bidimensional way. We need them too. We need reactions. We need the vitality of opposition, in a way, opposition to gravity, opposition to conformity, opposition to anything that is static. The open house in Malibu, this was not built for Kim Basinger, the actress. It was not built. Now, the Dalian International Conference Center in China, it was built. And look at this, former communist here pushing this thing, as in the old times. And look at the building built by Koch Himmelblau. You would wonder, how could these people, this synchronicity, this simultaneity? Well, it is, because China has both aspects, and it's amazing what they do now. At this point, China is the most extravagant lab of experiments in the world in the field of architecture. Look what they built. The former communists. But, as I noticed yesterday when I discovered, and please, I invite you, I suggest to you to look at the pavilion of Switzerland this year in Dubai. Looking at pictures of it, you say communism is coming back. Unbelievable. From Switzerland. Just search for it. Swiss Pavilion, Dubai 2021. And then you'll understand what I'm talking about. If redness symbolizes in many ways, or sometimes communism, then you'll see the red pavilion of Switzerland, which in my opinion, very explicitly seems to be oriented left, so to speak, ideologically. Now you will say it's a perversion. How could we contemplate Switzerland, promoting communism. It doesn't do it explicitly, but I don't know how else to interpret its image, the image of its pavilion this year in Dubai. Anyway, China continues to challenge itself and to challenge us through what they build. It's a huge building. Look at the exquisiteness of the top view. It's that. I mean, it's coherent, it's curved, it's lyrical, it's geometrically rigorous, it's everything. And without high technology, you simply cannot do this. Now, le Musée de Confluence in Lyon, which I have seen, I visited it. So let's read a little bit about it. Musée de Confluence was conceived as a medium for the transfer of knowledge rather than as a showroom for the 2.2 million objects in its collection. And accessibility is a key theme of Kopf Himmelblau's layout. The Austrian architecture firm divided the building into three parts: the crystal, the cloud, and the plinth, which contain entrance foyer, exhibition spaces, and auditoriums and workshops, respectively. This was an impressive building site, and if something agitates you visiting the building or looking at the drawings, is this idea that Wolf Prix said that our architecture today should express complexity. And but there are some paradoxes here, because he admires a lot, as I said, Constantin Brâncuș, and for Brâncuș, arriving at simplicity was a goal. And you wonder, how come that an architect who admires Brâncuș advocates complexity? But between what is simple and what is complex, maybe it is not such a long distance if what is called simple is not simplistic, because in a way, what is simple is a conquered complexity. But, and I think Brâncuș himself said this, but maybe for our time, we have to go back to some kind of acknowledging the turbulent forces of life on Earth, but also life outside of the Earth, cosmic if you want. Because for too long, modern architecture was trying to hide away what appeared to be complex. We were content with simplistic so-called solutions, which didn't acknowledge the truth about life, the truth about us. And this turbulent architecture perhaps is necessary, at least for the time being, because again, yes, the turmoil of life was simply not acknowledged. I showed you a picture of Mark Quigley, the former dean at Columbia University in New York, who for 15 years led that school, and he wrote actually a manifesto called Towards Turbulence. This is the section through the building by Kopf Himmelblau in Lyon, in France. I find these interiors in a way intriguing and correct. I don't know what Wolf Prix and Kopf Himmelblau think about these, animals in this museum of science, but or confluences. They stopped animals, the grayness and the geometry around them, and I feel there is I don't know, I could be wrong, but I feel there is perhaps some kind of a criticism towards the sadness of doing this. I don't know. I don't know. But this to me is not a very optimistic interior, in terms of its expression. Um, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't assume, a dangerous path in interpreting it. But I find there is something ominous here, something dark. I mean, look at these bones of animals, and look at, you know, how could one still believe in the joyous discovery of the world and the scientific triumph over animals and plants when we see these things? It's something, in my opinion, dark, and perhaps it should be dark. But as opposed to other science museums, here we are not offered the happy-go-lucky atmosphere. No, there is no such thing here. So it's possible that the architect or the architects at Kop Himmelblau had a more truthful apprehension or perception of what man did to nature, essentially, animals and plants alike. Look, again, it's also maybe a meditation on our own vulnerability and death. I think the chosen design is correct aesthetically, but I don't see this kind of architecture expressing some kind of a triumphalism. Look at me, science discovered it all, everything is perfect, we are in control. That's not what I see here. Anyway, the building itself is making you wonder. Of course, where you have confluences, meaning meeting between various fields, there is a place of conflict, of tension, of disjunctions, and this is what we look at here. Actually, this was anyway a sketch, an initial sketch. Now, this mini pavilion and opera space, which they built for München, but it could be dismantled and reassembled in any other place, is this one, which, in my opinion, shows a certain asocial tendencies, if I can call it so, and I will explain why. Again, it's about a patella bourgeoisie, but it happens that it's exactly the bourgeoisie that attends opera concerts. And it is a building that, could amaze one that it was actually built. If the client was itself part of that bourgeoisie. Of course, there is a functional reasoning behind this rather aggressive, triangles pointing towards the street. Here you see a fragment of the car, and I will read about it. I will explain it. So it's a small pavilion, an opera pavilion, inspired by two musicians, Mozart and Jimi Hendrix. Wolf Prix loves music, loves Mozart, and loves Jimi Hendrix. And you'll understand in what way the building was inspired by these two musicians. Here it is a section of the, apparently these things are meant to, protect the musical space from the noise of the passing cars. That might be the case, but I also think it's an aesthetical expression of possibly, a certain adversity that the avant-garde artist or the avant-garde architect has vis-a-vis, the bourgeois. But what we look at here, these are not proletarians. These are exactly those bourgeois, that bourgeois segment of society, the proletarian doesn't really have time and perhaps also money for operas. The architect, okay, the architect is the one who builds, is the one who designs. But in this case, we have to, and not just in this case, we have to understand the immense work that the architect has to do in order to negotiate with the clients, with those who, build, who spend their money to build a certain building. It requires great skill. That's why I kept saying that perhaps rhetorics and even theater should be taught in architecture schools, because it doesn't matter how good the project is if you cannot defend it, if you cannot advocate it, if you cannot negotiate with the so-called clients, you'll fail to implement it. And I imagine Wolf Prix is an excellent negotiator, because, to build such a building, without being a great negotiator, I don't think it's easily possible. I mean, there are much less, audacious buildings which fail to be built. To build something like this truly requires an appreciable capacity to advocate it and to negotiate with those in power. Now, we see here what they did. Now, I don't know exactly all the technicalities, but through scripting and programming, they absorbed or they analyzed the musical frequencies in two musical pieces, one by Amadeus and one from Jimi Hendrix. And apparently they transformed these, records, these recordings. You see here Mozart and at the top Jimi Hendrix, and somehow it seems these frequencies found the visual expression in the manifestation of the building, the physical manifestation of the building. It's an attempt to unite music with art, the so-called music with architecture, the so-called frozen music, as architecture was called. Now, the Museum of Contemporary Art and Planning exhibition in Shenzhen, China, another huge building in a huge country which builds anything. I mean, they build anything. Here, probably there was some, again, inspiration coming from the beginning of the world by Brancusi, perhaps, I don't know. But you can imagine to build something like this, it's not easy. I mean, yes, you can make a sketch on paper or who knows how, but to actually build it, it's another story. And it was built in China, a former communist country. I wonder what Mao thinks of what his country is doing these days, if he sees what his country is doing these days. Maybe he does, and he has sleepless nights because of it. Imagine the most extravagant avant-garde of the West building in the East, building in China, and they do. China was wise enough to invest in technology. They progressed economically dramatically, and they are also wise enough to import even troubling architecture from overseas. I think they have the right strategy. In other words, they bring in the newest new, and I think they do the right thing, because how else are you to fight the shadows of the past except through bringing the newest expressions, artistic, architectonic, and as I said, technologically, China is far. It is far, and they did it very quickly. Maybe other countries should learn from China. And I think you who are here, you know what I'm referring to. Himmelblau in China. I call it the visceralization of architecture. It's true in terms of materials, the materials employed, maybe that visceralization is not as complete as perhaps it could have been, but in terms of shapes and spaces and so on, this stomach of the building does have, something of what we might call viscera. And this in particular is, it is extravagant and amazing even. It's almost surreal. And we end the presentation now. I still have one little work to show, but let's look again at Mr. Prix and let's wish him happy birthday. This is the cover of a book which I have actually. It's called Massive Attack, the Institute of Architecture Sliver Lecture Series, and several very important architects and critics were invited to express themselves about architecture, about education, and so on. We see them there: Hans Hollein, Aaron Betsky, whom I mentioned, the director of the Taliesin West School, Patrick Schumacher, Zaha Hadid, Peter Cook, Peter Neuver, Hiroshi Abe, many, Tom Main, Eric Owen Moss, Greg Lin, Hani Rashid, Michael Rotondi, Carme Pinos from Barcelona, and Wolf Prix. And here he is again, elegant as always. And I end this presentation, by the way of his birthday today, with a fashion work. I read that Himmelblau designed an anti-surveillance code. And here it is. It's also called the CHBL, which is an abbreviation of Himmelblau Jammer Code. It's here. And, architects, if they achieve a certain success, they begin to flirt with fashion, with all kinds of other fields. Now, if this is truly working against surveillance, I don't know. But it's kind of interesting in terms of, what a code might look like, in the vision of this important architecture office. Look at the wearer. It's a coat which is very, in a way, forward-looking, but also past-looking, or it's a coat which can be found somehow in very old cultures and even in traditional cultures with some slight modifications, not the same materials, not with the same function, the one that was invoked as being against surveillance. I'm not sure it can escape surveillance, but no one can contest its, being ingenious and aesthetically welcoming ornament, a welcoming fabric, weaving, even if an artificial fabric. I would probably wear something like this too, if its price was not, prohibitive, as I imagine it is. It is extravagant, but it matches the architecture of optimal Blau and Wolf Prix. And I'm happy that, they keep creating new things, and some of them provocative, some of them maybe, some I consider, I don't know how, but it is important that, breaking the frontiers or pushing the frontiers is a phenomenon which does not stop. Thank you, and happy birthday, Wolf Prix.